Hello, and thank you for joining me today. My name is Wendy Hewitson, and I'm the AgriTech Programme Manager for Barclays Eagle Labs. And you've joined us today for our final session within our AgriTech Awareness Week. So today we're looking at the topic of adopting your operating model for success. But before we get started with our keynote speakers, I do have a short mandatory disclaimer that I need to run through with you. So please do bear with me. So today we have asked Ian Collison from J.A. Collison and Sons and James Brown from Pollybell Farm and founder of Earth Rover to join us today to provide us with some tips and tricks on adapting your operating model for success. So the topics discussed today are an overview of options for you to think about and to help you with your independent research and business decisions. So they are not intended as recommendations or advice. Please remember as well that your business has its own individual circumstances, so the statements and views expressed may not be applicable or suitable for your business. So as I said, my name is Wendy Hewitson, and I am the AgriTech Programme Manager for Barclays Eagle Labs. So what do you know about Barclays Eagle Labs? Who are we? What do we do? So Eagle Labs is the UK's largest network of business incubators, providing access to a community of startups, events, programming, industry experts, mentors, and rapid prototyping support. We have a combined community of over 650 technology startups within our labs, and they are based over 25 UK locations. Our goal is around developing a scaled and engaged founder community with a wider, innovative entrepreneurial ecosystem. So when I talk about Eagle Labs, we have quite a few objectives and what we want to do to help support those tech businesses. The first one of those is around accelerating UK businesses. So that is supporting the high potential, high growth technology businesses that are starting up and scaling up, connecting in an agri lens, the AgriTech startup businesses to research and development, to expertise, to farmers, and across the supply chain. One of the other areas we want to look at is collaborative innovation. So in the face of emerging technologies and disruption across all industries, there's never been a better time to connect the startup community to established corporates, to exchange ideas, partner, and innovate together. So we're trying to stimulate innovation and collaboration for us across the pan supply chain. Then there's Industry 4.0. So we're looking at providing access to and training on the evolving technologies and skills, plus providing and facilitating a role in encouraging positive innovation and disruption. For me, that is demystifying what Industry 4.0 is for our farming clientele, to become the voice of the farmer to the industry, and vice versa, for the technology companies to understand what are the issues and problems faced directly from farmer level. So I mentioned Agriculture 4.0. What is it? Now, I'm farming background, and I hear a lot of myths, and I want to dispel that. Agriculture 4.0 is purely a tool to support, not to replace the farmer. And it covers many different areas, and that can be around productivity, improving efficiencies, or looking at sustainability of the business. And one key one that we all suffer from is time. So it's looking at saving people time. As I've said, it's a tool to support, not to replace the farmer. So what do we know? Who are we? What are you looking at today? Who's thinking about AgriTech, but not sure whether it's worth the hype? So today we're speaking with members of the farming community who have adopted innovation and telling us how it has benefited their business, so that you can look at the considerations around that and look at other options. We know the world's population is expected to increase by 2 billion in the next 30 years. That's from an estimated 7.7 billion currently to a 9.7 billion in 2050. And it's estimated that's going to require an extra 60 to 70% more food. So what are the reasons for the change in the food production? Agri-food is the largest manufacturing sector in the UK. It supports a food chain that generates over £108 billion per annum, with 3.9 million employees plus. So it truly is an international industry, and it exports circa £20 billion of UK manufactured goods. However, it is understood that the global food chain is under immense pressure from population growth, climate change, political pressures affecting items such as migration, population drift from rural to urban regions, and from the demographics of an ageing global population. So those are some of the challenges that are recognised in the UK's industrial strategy. So the reality is the environmental implications of these challenges are real. The water wasted in food that is never eaten is equal to the water needs of Africa. And the CO2 emissions are equivalent to removing every car off the road in the world. Roughly 1/3 of food produced in the world for human consumption, that's approximately 1.3 billion tonnes, gets lost or wasted. So the food industry does accept it faces enormous systemic challenges. And future expansion of agriculture is not a viable solution to meeting the future needs, because we're using nearly all of the land that's suitable for agriculture already. So what can we do about it? Again, as I said, relying on increased production alone, whether through increased yield or harvest frequency, will be an important solution, but it's not a sufficient one. Hence, to successfully close this gap, we'll need to adopt a variety of innovative strategies. We must produce more whilst using more efficiency in what we already produce. So there is good news. Most farmers and producers need to accept that they'll need to adopt technologies. These will be introduced gradually alongside their existing production systems. And there are new technologies and techniques being developed. So if you're a farmer who's thinking about AgriTech, but not sure whether it's worth the hype, as I said, we're speaking to members of the farming community who have adopted this. They will tell us how it's benefited their business and offer you some helpful tips to consider AgriTech innovation and its adoption. So who have we got speaking today? So today my first speaker is Ian Collison from J.A. Collison and Sons. This is a family business supplying seasonal cut flowers to the UK, multiple retailers. They supply large quantities of several different crops throughout the year, making them one of the largest cut flower growers in the country. I've been told each year they produce in excess of 32 million stems of cut flowers under 6 hectares of glass and polythene tunnels. So today I'm going to introduce Ian, who's going to talk about innovation and automation in this niche industry. Hi Ian, how are you today?
Hi Wendy. Yeah, very good, thank you. A bit warm, but apart from that, it's all good.
Good.
So yeah, today I want to talk about innovation and automation in a niche industry. We've got to be realistic. The UK cut flower industry is a fairly niche industry. So who are we? As Wendy said, we're a large seasonal cut flower grower. We're based in Norfolk near Kings Lynn. We grow a range of crops, producing all year round. We have production 12 months of the year, and we supply many of the UK's largest multiple retailers. So our biggest customers would be Sainsbury's, M&S, Asda, Waitrose, but we supply most of the UK multiple retailers really through the year. We employ up to 100 staff at in peak season. That varies through the year. Our peaks are usually March for Mother's Day and August. And we're a growing business. We've got a good market position, and we have got opportunities to expand what we do. There's big opportunities in cut flowers, certainly for import substitution. Most of the flowers sold in the UK are imported. So why automate? Why did we decide to automate? Really, as I said, sales volume and demand have grown steadily. So we've got big demand for our product, but our prices are under constant pressure. We've been very lucky in the last 10-15 years. We've had a very plentiful and relatively cheap labour supply versus our European competitors. But now with national living wage and wage inflation over the last few years, we're getting to the point where we're pretty much on a par in terms of labour cost. We're facing further increases in labour costs. Living wage looks like it's going to be trending on plus 5% year on year. And with pensions and everything else, it's, you know, the cost of labour is increasing. But on top of that, it's also becoming harder to recruit. We're having to pay more to retain the staff that we've got and to recruit the best people. The indigenous population still don't really show much inclination to work in cut flowers, and the availability of EU migrants is very much in question post-Brexit. We just don't know what the situation is going to be. Our competition has traditionally come from Europe, but now we're also facing competition from further afield where labour is much cheaper, so sub-Saharan Africa, South America. And the only way that in the UK we can fight back against that is to automate, to try and make ourselves more efficient, and to reduce our labour costs by automating some of the work. So the first thing that we chose to look at, the main focus of our automation so far, has been grading and bunching of cut flowers. It's something we did spend, and we still do spend an awful lot of our time doing. And automation of this process is a massive change for the industry generally. There's been mechanisation around for a number of years, but traditionally, it's always really relied on human eye and hand grading to some extent. The new machines that have come along have basically replaced this with a combination of high-tech imaging, software, and robotic handling to minimise the amount of labour input that you need to give to grade and bunch your flowers. So our company have installed 2 Bercomex Furora machines, the first in autumn 2014 and a second machine in November 2017. The Bercomex Furora is a fully automated grading and bunching machine for cut flowers. It was originally designed as a tulip machine. A group of tulip growers in Holland got together, approached Bercomex, the manufacturer, and asked them to develop an automated grading machine for their crop. But it is being developed for a range of other cut flowers, which I'll come on to later. The cost of the project in total runs to about 1.1 million. So that's the machine overview. So you can see there we've got on the left-hand side, we've got a team feeding the machine with ungraded, unsorted stems direct from production, so direct from the cropping team. The machine in the middle, which is doing the grading, the sorting, and then we've got finished bunches coming out on the outfeed conveyor to the right-hand side. So that's a picture of the robotic manipulators which place the bunches down at the end. So you can see we've got finished bunches coming out of the machine, and they've been completely graded and sorted by the machine. The process, we feed in the large quantities of ungraded, unsorted stems. They're fed in manually, pre-processed where they're debulbed or trimmed, so we remove the bulbs or trim the stems. They're rotated and held head down to presentation to the cameras because we need to get good imaging of the buds, and we also need to prevent the heads getting damaged, so we pick the stems up at the bottom and present the heads to the cameras. The stems are automatically separated and spaced out so they can be photographed and scanned individually inside the machine. We then scan each stem with infrared and digital cameras, and we also have the option to use X-ray if we need to. The reason for using X-ray would be, for example, on a tulip, the bud can be hidden behind a leaf. By using X-ray, we can look through the leaf and get an accurate measurement of bud and length for each individual stem. So this, as you can imagine, gives us very, very accurate grading and bunching. The first one big advantage of the machine really has been the fact that the grading has improved. Grading by hand and eye is good, but it's not as accurate as the machine. The stems are then sorted into bunches. They're picked up by the robotic manipulators, placed onto a bunching line where they're banded and ready for collection and collation onto trolleys or into boxes. So this is a sort of an overview of the screen that we get with the various images that the machine is generating. So to the left of the screen, we have the infrared image. In the center, we have X-ray. On the right-hand side, we have digital imaging. And we have that set of images for every single stem that goes through the machine. In a typical day on tulips, each machine will be bunching around 100 to 150,000 stems. And for every one of those stems, we've got very, very good quality images, good level of data, which is also very useful for analysing quality between varieties, quality between different batches of the same variety even. So it gives us a very, very useful data source as well. The bunching stations, so the bunching stations take the bunches, pass them down onto the collecting belt where they're ready to be further packed, and that's what the machine has enabled us to do. The finished bunches coming out of the machine, the work that would have been done by human hand, human eye, is now being done by the machine, which has freed our staff up to add value to those bunches. So we're able to add value to the bunches by sleeving them packing finished product ready to go into the supermarkets, ready to be sold. Got a short video now of the machine working, the overall process. So we've got the stems being fed into the machine. So this is the initial operation, the pre-trim, the pre-processing line. The stems are then lifted up simply to feed them into the machine at the right level. At the top of this belt, you see the machine turns the stems through 90 degrees to be able to hang them upside down, as I said. Heads are what has the value for the customer, so that's what we're looking to protect. And the next step is the separation, where we space the stems out. We're spacing the stems now. They're fed in, they pass through the cameras. So you'll see the flashing here of the digital camera. The infrared camera is also inside that box. We've got the X-ray inside the grey box again. So by the time the stems have passed through and come out of the other side of the box, so when the stems come out here, we've already collected all the images. The stems are then lifted up. They're lifted up here by pneumatic ram, trimmed to the same length, accurate to within 2 millimeters. So we now know the grading characteristics of each stem. We know it's trimmed to the correct length. We then pass round. Any stems which are out of specification can be dropped onto the belt, which we'll see in a moment. For anything that's out of specification stage for regrading or selling into the secondary markets, for anything that's separated there is the secondary product. And then we come round and you'll see here robotic bunching stations. So at this point, the stems are counted into bunches. Each stem is individually counted into the bunching station. When the bunch is complete, it's picked up, placed down onto the bunching line. Bunch, yeah, 6 stems full down onto the bunching line. Where it will then be tied. And what we achieve, as you'll see, is a very even, uniform product ready for further processing. The results are much better than we would previously have achieved by hand or by eye. So the outcomes for us, we've used the machine since we installed it to bunch all of our tulips, all of our scented stocks and our longiflorum lilies, which has controlled the cost and improved the efficiency. We're doing now with 7 people what would previously have taken at least 20 people, depending on the crop, sometimes more. The first machine paid for itself within 4 to 5 years. The second machine is on track to do so also within the same time frame, so that will have paid for itself next year. The main thing it's done from a staff point of view is we haven't got rid of any staff, we haven't lost anybody. It's freed our staff up though to undertake more on-farm packing. We were getting requests from customers to do more on-farm packing to shorten the supply chain as much as possible. So we're adding value to our products and reducing the amount of monotonous, repetitive labour for our staff. So we've increased our production, increased our turnover without adding any more staff. It's also increased the amount of product we're able to get through the pack house in a day, so we've been able to do more with the same infrastructure. As I said before, the quality and the consistency of the bunches is definitely improved versus where we were. We've trained and upskilled some of our best staff to operate the machine. One thing that has been key to us is having trained, qualified operators not only to run the machine, but also to maintain it. And we've trained our staff up to do that. That's been very, very positive. And another big thing, it's demonstrated to our customers that we're investing in efficiency and quality. So we're not just looking to save money, we're also looking to improve quality. And we've won more orders on the back of this. You know, the drive for efficiency is one thing, but if we can also show them we've got very, very accurate grading working exactly to their specifications, which is what the cameras enable us to do, then it also helps to convince them to place orders with us. So funding the project. For the first machine, we were very lucky to receive a grant for part of the cost. The second machine was self-funded with some borrowing from our usual lender. When we applied for the grant, we were very open, and I think I would encourage people to be open about your plans. It's not always about creating jobs. I know a lot of grant applications talk about job creation and the number of new roles that you're going to create. We went into the grant application process with a tack that we were actually protecting jobs that are under threat from imports. And that's just as valuable as, or should be, as creating jobs. If you can protect a job, upskill people and add value to your product, that's just as valuable. So don't be afraid to be open about that and focus very much on the fact that you can upskill your staff. Think about where you can add value to your products by automating, freeing up time and space and freeing up your staff to do more added value work. So the lessons and challenges I would say, be willing to think outside the box. As I said at the start, we're a niche industry and a lot of our crops are very, very small in terms of global market. So certainly in terms of UK producers, there's not normally more than 10 to a dozen producers. The machine we've installed is a tulip machine, but we've worked with the manufacturer to adapt it for other crops. It's a win-win really, because it opens up new markets for the manufacturer. They've used our machine to promote the use of furores for bunching lilies, for instance. It is a niche industry, and there's not sufficient scale to justify developing bespoke machinery for every crop. But if you can repurpose existing machines, then it's brilliant for everybody. It works very well for the manufacturer. And following on from that, I would say don't underestimate your value to the manufacturer, particularly with a new machine. Real life test beds are invaluable, certainly much better than you can test as much as you want in a lab, in a factory. But if you can give in-kind support, developing machines on farm with real product, you can often get a lot of support work done for free. One thing you will definitely come to rely on the machine. If you install a machine to save people, it needs to be reliable, because once you've redeployed your staff, you can't suddenly go back. If we need 20 people for bunching tulips, and those people have been redeployed adding value by packing, we can't suddenly, if the machine breaks down, go back to bunching by hand. The UK agent who maintains the machines is only 20 miles away. But to be perfectly honest, when the machines first started being installed, they were learning on the job as much as we were. The spare parts holding they had was very, very much insufficient, and it's still not perfect. It's been an ongoing process over the last few years, trying to get to the point where we've got enough spare parts within an hour of the farm. If we get a breakdown, we need to be up and running within an hour, really. Another thing I would say is do not underestimate servicing and maintenance costs. Specialist machines, specialist parts come with specialist price tags. They don't sell many of these machines. Some of the parts are specially made for the machine, therefore they are expensive. Make sure to do your homework, speak to users, speak to farmers who are using machines or machines like them, not just the salesmen. Salesmen are very good at telling you their machines never break down, but you need a realistic input from somebody who's got experience of working with the machine, and try to get first-hand experience if you possibly can. I sent 2 or 3 of my guys over to Holland where the machines are already working, and they spent time working on the machines, working with the machines, learning how to maintain them, and sort of troubleshooting, trying to find out what problems we could potentially come up against within our system. And that's another thing I would say with your staff, is to make sure they're involved in the process, make sure they're on board with what you're trying to do. Are they keen to learn and adapt? Will they embrace it, or do they see automation as a threat to their jobs? It's important to take the staff with you and make sure they understand you're not trying to do them out of a job, you're trying to give them a higher value job, or improve their knowledge and improve their skills. So that's been a big thing for us, trying to take the staff with us. So thank you very much. And concludes my presentation.
Fabulous, Ian. Thank you so much. I've learned lots, and I think really key for me was watching that video. It actually showed, what used to be a totally manual, monotonous job that could have quite a large area margin for error, is now obviously a lot quicker and slicker. So absolutely, thank you so much for that. That quite nicely leads on to the gentleman that's going to do my second presentation. So my second speaker is James Brown from Pollybell Farm. So Pollybell Farm is a family-owned, diverse organic farming business. I'm sure he'll correct me if I get this wrong. The Brown family has a strong history in farming for over the past 120 years, and an immense passion for growing healthy, affordable food whilst enhancing the land and the surrounding environment. So Paul, I believe, is a 5th generation of the Brown family. And from my knowledge, he brings attention on details, costing, and a massive, like myself, enthusiasm for enhancing the business through the use of technology and managing data to improve, drive improvements. And he's also the founder of Earth Rover. So I'm not going to steal all of his thunder, because I'm sure this presentation is going to educate us all. So are you okay there, James?
Thank you very much, Wendy. Yeah, thank you. And also thank you, Ian. We face even if we're in very different parts of the industry, we're also in a specialist niche sector in organics and our fresh produce, and we're facing a lot of the similar challenges. And I think that's something which, Ian, just to follow on quickly from, the solution you're looking for might not be exactly the problem you're solving, but somewhere someone has solved the problem. So usually look around and don't be scared to look across, whether it's livestock, whether it's horticulture, whether it's arable. There's usually another solution. You say, actually, I can see how that could work for me. So if I may, I'll give a quick introduction to me and our business and who we are and what we've been doing. So as Wendy mentioned, Pollybell's an organic farm, and I'm the 5th generation to be involved. I just thought I'd give you, we've had an interesting sort of history and involvement with agriculture, including obviously farming and marketing and selling of agricultural inputs, so that's AgChem. But I came back into the business in 2007, and the first thing I was involved in is actually selling our AgChem business and focusing on building the organic business, which is where my passion is. And since then, we've moved from just supplying raw products to actually final packing and direct supply to retail. And as Wendy also mentioned, more recently founding Earthrow, which is an AgriTech business, which I'll come on to. So why do we farm organically? For me, it's really the fact that whilst I own land, the biggest asset is my soil. And the beauty of being an organic farmer and getting it wrong as often as we do is we can actually try things, and it really does encourage the team to say, how else can we do this? What else can be done? And obviously, from a personal point of view, it is all about sustainability and about wanting to leave the farm in a better state for my children than when I took it on. So we have a diverse rotation, fertility building, which is grazed with sheep and dairy cows, arable crops, so wheat, barley, beans, brassicas, alliums, and roots. So a whole range of different crops, and they are supplied to all the main UK retailers, and they are packed on farm. So just as a quick overview of the cropping, as you can see, in value terms, the green veg at the top and the roots are the most valuable in terms of turnover, but in terms of area, so it's about 4,500 acres of cropping out of a 5,000 acre farm with trees, ponds, rivers, etc. As I mentioned, we built in 2012 a pack house on farm, and the idea here was to shorten the organic supply chain and supply products directly. And our experience has been, it's been relatively easy to find automation to go into the pack house to remove labour, but it's also an easy place to recruit labour into because it's a nice indoor environment. If we also got the livestock part of the business, and this was sort of a real belief that for organically we needed a mixed farming rotation. So we've reintroduced an organic dairy, there's about 600 milking cows. Last year we finished 6,000 store lambs from our own breeding flock and also bought in stores. We've got a beef unit which is being developed just for to utilise more of the fertility builds, but also we've got various triple SIs and riverbanks, and we have our own retail shop which we've just set up this year, which had a demand for beef. And we're also going to go back into organic pork, and the main reason being that the organic cereal markets haven't been performing as well, and so we want to add value to those crops. Got a large-scale countryside stewardship scheme, which, as you can try and see here, is spread all over the farm, and this is also part of our way of controlling pest and disease on the farm. So the strips are all about encouraging beneficial insects, which are our pest control. Done some interesting works looking at actually understanding this more, and I think this is one of the first things before adopting anything new is actually we knew lots of people looking at the biopesticides in terms of beneficials and releasing those, but we wanted to understand first of all what actually have we got. And I think this would be my sort of big tip is first of all understand where you are before wanting to make change and measure it. So for example, our independent invertebrate survey, one field margin found 200 different species of insect. And therefore, had we just gone and released the beneficials into that point, we'd have actually upset that natural environment. So really understand what it is you're going to do before you make a change. The other bit is, as a business, water is a hugely important part of the business, and we've been investing heavily in both the water security, but then also utilizing that water and using some of the soil moisture probes and some of the irrigation software to better apply it so that we use it more efficiently. Again, as Wendy mentioned earlier, there's huge amounts of water waste in the food production systems. And finally, obviously, energy security. We've designed an energy system which, whilst not properly taking us off grid, produces what we require as a business to use. And in particular, having taken the land out of production to give us water security, we floated solar panels on top of the reservoir. Just to come on now to Earth Rover. Now, this was set up a couple of years ago, and it was mainly because as a business, I had a number of challenges that I wanted to look at. And the first of these was, and it's the accountant in me sort of coming through. So my background was as a chartered accountant before coming back into the business. And why do I buy so many seeds and then sell a lot fewer heads of broccoli out? So our conversion is we only actually sell half the broccoli heads out of the seed and plants we purchase. And to me, that efficiency isn't there. So I'm the boring one in the business who always looks at yield as slightly negatively. What did I buy to start with as an input, and what have I actually achieved out the other end? And then ask the question, where are the losses? And the simple answer came when we tried to do trials of looking at this and manually looking. I realized very quickly that with 8 million broccoli plants on the farm, it's very difficult to keep track of them. So Earth Rover, which Pollybell helped to found with a tech team, came up first of all with this scouting system. And this scouting system effectively took the brain off an autonomous vehicle, which was from the ExoMars rover, hence the name Earth Rover, and involves a camera system and highly accurate GPS, which maps every single plant on the farm, gives it an XYZ coordinate, and then every time we come back through the crop, we can measure how each plant is growing, and then when the broccoli is coming ready to harvest, the head within that, sizing it to predict when the heads are going to be ready. The main thing for me with this was, and why I was so keen to mount it on tractors and existing bits, was we played with drones and played with other technologies, and they produced lots of very nice pretty pictures, but they didn't actually tell me anything about my crop. And they used a lot of management time in order to get me the information. So I wanted to take the question, well, whilst I'm in a field anyway, let's gather data about it. So in the photo over here, obviously I've taken the photo from the front, behind that there is a weeder, and this is the idea that we merge this data collection in with other operations. What this does is it has 3D cameras, which is made up of actually 3 different cameras, including NDVI and RGB cameras in there, a meter off the ground, and you can produce very high quality definition pictures. And the AI classifier is effectively looking at the plants and measuring the volume of each plant as we are going along in real time. It's taking that effectively what is 3 gigabytes of data a minute and processing it into 3 kilobytes so we can actually get the data off the field. And this is one of the things you need to think about, is some of the tech you will see is absolutely fantastic, but will it work on your farm with your connectivity and with your limitations, because as Wendy said at the beginning, every farm is different and not everything will work everywhere. What we then end up doing is producing a farm intelligence system where, and apologies on here, but effectively you can see this is a map of every plant on the farm. The map of every plant on the farm, what it's actually beginning to give us is a huge amount of data. So the bottom left picture, what we've got developed is a weekly email flash, which just tells us plot by plot what's our plant density. Because one of the key things is have I got the right number of plants and how are they growing? And for me, as the sort of business owner, I'm looking at a very top level number, but there are others in the business, from managers and then operators, who want a lot more detail. And I think this is the other thing to think about. If you're making the decision to purchase a piece of tech for your business, think about who the user is going to be and who the multiple users within your business are, and actually how they all get something from it. So just to look at some of the development projects Earth Rover is working on, we've got, starting in the bottom left, so the scouting, we're finding that if the more often we scout, actually even more data we can get. And there are times when we're not doing an operation in the field that we want to gather data. So we've developed this very simple autonomous scouting, which is able to drive itself around the farm. We've got above that a innovative weeding. So this is non-chemical weeding, which we've just filed a patent on. We've been working on selective broccoli harvesting, and that's the first prototype, and we're now on sort of version 2, which is being developed at the moment. And down in the bottom right here, this is a forecasting tool which we're doing with University of Lincoln and the University of Reading as a series project. It's merging the 53 Met Office weather forecast data to produce both a hindcast, i.e. how did a plant get from growing to where it is, and a forecast, what's the weather going to be, to tell me when it's going to be, the crop's going to be ready. And the whole idea here is so that I can more accurately model my crop, which means I can grow less hectares because I'll have less waste. So some of the big sort of benefits that we're seeing so far from these projects are when you actually start to understand your crop in a lot more detail, you start to see patterns. So we've got, for example, at the point of planting, we've been able to spot with this camera system that one of the rows wasn't planting at the correct density. Small bits, but when you have, as we do here, a relatively high value product, every single hedge per hectare matters. The other bit which is really interesting is when we've been looking in the past at cost, we've looked at the physical cost of doing an operation. So what's either my seasonal labour to go and do it, or alternatively, what's the cost of the man, the fuel, the tractor, the implement. One of the things that you also have as a cost is what damage am I doing to the crop by doing it, or what's going to be my impact on yield of not doing it. And what we're seeing is that particularly with some of our weeding, if we don't use chemicals, we're using mechanical weeding, is that actually there's more cost in damage to the the damage to the crop by weeding with certain operators and also certain machines than there actually is in the physical cost, which was historically showing in our costings. So, there's lots of bits there. We're beginning to tackle this whole problem of why do I only sell 50% of the plants which I plant? And I think this is the real bit for me in terms of AgriTech is you've got to look at the projects that add value to you. You've got to think of what's the cost of me deploying it. And it's not just the cost of buying something, a piece of software, a piece of hardware. It's how's this going to impact, who's going to run it, who's going to buy into it, and who's going to want to make it work. Because as Ian will have found with his grading machine, and I found with bits of equipment in the pack house as well as on the field, getting the buy-in of the operator is far more important than the machine itself, because people need to make them work, and your team is still the most important part, and therefore keeping them involved, as Ian said, is absolutely critical to the development. So I think I'll pass back to Wendy now, as she's got a few questions for us.
Thank you very much, James. That was really, really easy, simple, and I think down to earth for everyone, including me, to understand. So I appreciate that. I think we'll bring back in Ian, because as you said, I've had quite a few questions emailed through. And as I mentioned, I'm a farmer's daughter, so I like to know what's going on, and I like to keep my nose to the ground to see what they want to know as well. I think one of the key things is each and every one of us has a responsibility to protect and encourage the sustainability of the food supply chain. So one of those questions I get asked is, whom do you see are going to become, or are the actual influencers and enablers to bring these technologies together? How are we going to ensure that this is disseminated right across the food supply chain? So I think I'll come to you first, Ian, for your thoughts on that, and then James can add his thoughts.
See, I think within our sector, probably the people that we're going to have to look to do that are going to be the likes of the AHDB and the Cut Flower Centre, who very much at the moment are still focused on crop and crop development variety trials. But I think this is going to become more and more important, knowledge transfer and visits. I mean, we have had some AHDB organised visits to look at automation, look at technology. I think that's something that's very, very important, getting growers onto farms, getting them into manufacturers' factories to see what's being done and to see what is possible, because it's very easy to sit in a room and explain to somebody, but if you can take them and physically show them a machine working, show them a machine in operation, it's a real big step forward. And they're the organisations that have got the contacts in the industry, got the reach to do that.
Yeah,
and from yourself, James?
Yeah, I was going to just say that I agree entirely with him. The thing I'd recommend to everyone is when that email pops into the inbox with an invite to go and look round something, yes, there's always something you could be doing on your farm, and you can always look down at your desk, as I do it from time to time, and it's got piles of different things. The amounts you learn by just going out and seeing people and talking. Ian and I have both hosted events. We've both been to each other's farms, even though we're in completely different industries. And what? You learn a lot from talking, and it's always actually the questions that people ask. Usually that really awkward question at the end when you're looking at something that, there's a real bit of insight. So I think that the bit which actually disseminates the information is anything that can encourage more of that collaboration between farmers and actually just going and doing it. I know sometimes we think we're all competitors with each other, and it can get very tight in the veg industry. What's that person doing? What am I doing? I don't want to tell everyone what I'm doing. And you don't have to tell everyone everything what you're doing, but I'm a big believer if you share with people, they will also share back, and you will pick up and you will learn. So to me, it's the community as a whole, and the huge power of some of the social media platforms as well, and the community groups which are on those, a really good place to pick up information on this.
Yeah, I totally agree. As say that cross-industry collaboration, and again, as you said earlier, between the manufacturers and all the different areas, the retailers, processors, we all have to come together, because I say this is not just one little problem that somebody's got the magic wand to. We really need to look at that. So what do you see are the next steps then for the industry's farmers? How are we going to enable them to take this forward? James?
Well, I think the next steps really are, it's down to, I am a big believer in this. As a farmer, you can't wait for someone else to come and do it for you. You've got to get out there, roll your sleeves up and go, look, there is lots of information and there are lots of technologies which are coming through. But think through, look, as you do with your usual business, you've got bank managers, you've got accountants and people who are advising you. What are the big challenges that you face? I mean, Ian and I have talked about labour, because in our industries, that's a huge one. It's, some of my crops are 40-50% of my main cost is labour. So focusing on automation, is a huge area, but that's not the case of every industry. And I think that the thing I would say is that, get out there, sit down. What are my priorities? What is it that I need to do to make my business better? And then go and look around the industry. There are lots of good shows. There are lots of good resources online and with the industry body, IMAGE, AHTB, but across all sectors, where there is information about it and where you can actually start to tackle some of those things. And then the next step is speak to the sellers of those technologies. They will more than happily put you in touch with growers who are using them or farmers who are using them, and go and talk to them. Is this any good? Is it any work? Because it's far better to talk to them about it, the person who's actually got to use the bit of kit, and say, yes, a great idea, but it's just a bit clunky, or it's a bit difficult, or I wish it would do that. And those are the bits which will really help you make those decisions. So rely on the rest of the industry as well, other people who have done the work, but also don't be afraid to go to businesses who have a similar product to something you think you want, and say, could you make that work for my crop, for my area? Because quite often the answer is they've never even thought about it, because no one's ever asked them before to make that work on broccoli or carrots or tulips. And actually a lot of the thing is quite transferable.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'd echo all of that. And just, if you think you need help, if you think you need financial help or advice, that there is advice out there. And if you need grant support, speak to the right people. And if the grant support isn't available, then speak to your MP. Tell your MP, tell the government what you actually need as an industry or as a business, because the government are keen to drive innovation. They're keen to improve efficiency. We keep hearing about efficiency and productivity in the UK. Well, certainly in horticulture, we have got some very, very efficient, very highly productive businesses. But we need government grant support. We need support to get this technology onto farm. So tell them what you need. Tell people what you actually need for support. We found very much that people are willing to help if you're open with them and you engage with them and you tell them what you need.
And I think that just to follow on from that as well, there's the local enterprise, the LEPs. Look at which one your local one is. They've also got some really good just basic business training. There's lots of grants and things for staff training as well, which is something I wasn't particularly aware of. There's the sort of European grants in terms of the diversification grants, but also Innovate UK. Sign up to the innovation funding. There's calls out all the time for different areas, and sometimes there's something there which actually, you can be part of. And the KTN have, which is Knowledge Transfer Network, also build partnerships. So they will put you in touch with AgriTech businesses who are looking for farmers to help develop their product. So there is real networks out there, and it's just a case of going and finding them.
Brilliant pieces of advice. So I think I'm going to put you on the spot here. If you were to look back, let's say 5-10 years ago, then what one piece of advice would you give yourself as a farmer wanting to enter into the world of agri and agri-tech? Go on then, Ian. I'll let you have that one first.
I think the thing I would say is go for it. Don't hold back. I say we spent quite a lot of time looking at automation, looking at different ways forward, wondering about payback, wondering about whether we would be able to justify the cost of the machine. But in hindsight, it was definitely we did the right thing, and go for it. If you're confident that you've made the right decision, back yourself, and go for it. Really embrace it and work with it. Would be my advice, really.
Exactly the same thing. Just do it, and the other thing to do is as Ian said, really back yourself, but bring your team on board. Make sure everyone who's going to be involved in this project is there at the beginning with you. You might have found a really good idea. Take your team along, and they've got the person who's going to be using this every day is as important to making it work as you are in signing off that investment. And as Ian said, the only regret I have really, I suppose, is not doing stuff sooner. Because all the ones which we went and did, God, God, I wish we'd done that 5 years ago. It would have been a hell of a lot more profitable. And that's sort of where we got to, is that, you know, that there are bits out there, and, you know, make it happen.
I think it's farmers by their very nature tend to be fairly pessimistic people. You get broken down a bit by the seasons of poor weather and all the rest of it, but you need to also, you know, say if you're sure that it's the right thing to do, back yourself and get on with it. So we've got, you know, further levels of automation that we're looking at now that we'd like to continue investing in, continue doing it in the current climate with everything that's going on. It's even for us, you know, we're part of the way down the road with automation. Even for us, it's still a daunting prospect, but just, you know, back yourself and go for it.
Brilliant. I love that. As you say, trust in yourself. Head over heart, heart over head. I don't know which way we're going to look on that one, but no, that was really, really informative, guys, and I can't thank you enough. I am sure if any of the people that are listening in today or watch this again when it's back on our YouTube channel want to get in touch, I'll be more than happy, obviously, to put you in touch with those people. So when you originally got the invite for attending today, you'll have seen there was AgriTech Eagle Labs at Barclays.com. Please do use that email to get in contact with us, and I can obviously facilitate the introductions to these guys, because as they say, they're happy to share. They've gone through the pain points. They don't want you to have to go through exactly the same pain points. They want themselves, they want the industry, they want farming as a sector, like I said at the beginning, to become the most sustainable ecosystem it possibly can. And we need to look at, as I say, feeding the planet and feeding ourselves without wrecking it. And these two guys, I say, they've gone for it. They've made the mistakes, then they've come out the other side, and they're quite happy to share their stories. So again, Ian, James, thank you. Thank you so much. I've loved your presentation today, and I'll hopefully catch up with you later on in the year, or maybe 12 months, 18 months, and see where you're up to with your next stage of innovation. So thank you both.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.